Hey everybody, welcome back to HomeRecordingMadeEasy.com and another installment of Questions and Coffee with David. It is literally 4 a.m. this morning and I'm up nice and early like I am every morning answering your questions to try to help you make better music in your home studio. So before we get to this week's batch of questions, if you could do me a favor, if you like what you see in this video, please hit that subscribe button. Also go out to Home Recording Made Easy on Facebook and follow me there, as there's always content there that may not necessarily be part of YouTube. And for more tips, tricks, concepts, and training around everything home recording, be sure to head out to HomeRecordingMadeEasy.com and take a look at the Quick Mix series and the Made Easy series, as those are long form video training products that go a lot more in depth than anything I do on YouTube, that'll absolutely help you bring your mixes and your music productions in your home studio to the next level. So now let's get our cup of coffee together and let's answer this week's questions, and let's take a look at question number 1. Okay, question number 1 comes from Jeff, and Jeff writes, "Hi David, in one part of your Home Recording Made Easy Volume 2, you go over the concept of early reflections. I find it somewhat difficult and tedious, especially for routing. I do hear some differences, I think, but it's part of the mixing process I don't enjoy much, and it seems to overcomplicate and crowd up my track numbers. I'm willing to put in the work and make it part of my mixing routine, but I would like to ask you this. What is your take on it today? Do you still think it's absolutely necessary? Is it still something you personally do on all your mixes? Thanks very much, Jeff." Well, Jeff, thanks for writing in. Early reflections is a concept that I teach in Mixing Made Easy Volume 2, which is more of the advanced concepts and techniques long-form training video. You can find it at HomeRecordingMadeEasy.com under the Made Easy series section of my website. It's a great training video if you're interested in maybe moving on to some more advanced concepts. So Jeff is right. We talk about early reflections. And early reflections is something that is a little hard to grasp at first when you first hear about it, and it's a little difficult to hear when you add early reflections. And basically the 20-second overview of what early reflections is. Early reflections is a way to add depth and some 3D dimension to your mix without having your tracks or your mix sound like it's washed in reverb. So it's a way to take something like, for example, a drum kit that might have been recorded really well, but it sounds really dry and really kind of lifeless, and you want to give it a little bit more space, a little bit more depth, but you don't want to add a reverb because a reverb sounds a little bit artificial or it may sound to be a little too much. So early reflections is a way to add that kind of 3D dimension to your mix, to give it some space, to give it some size, but again, to not sound washy. And the thing about early reflections that confuse a lot of people, and when you watch Mixing Made Easy Volume 2, I spend probably a good 45 minutes to an hour just on this topic, and we do a lot of listening on and off, is it's not something that you hear as much as you feel. And I know for some beginners, when we start talking about those kinds of terms, that people get a little confused and go, what does he mean? We talk a lot about the 3D sound field in Mixing Made Easy Volume 2. Early reflection plays a large part in that. Well, we're not just talking about the sound field being left and right, we pan things hard left and right, but we also talk about front and back. And we also talk about top and bottom. And a lot of beginners don't really realize that because it's not something that's commonly taught. And early reflections is a way to give you some size, top and bottom, and some front to back depth. Now, as far as, again, it's more of a felt thing. It's not a heard. You hear it, but you feel it more than you hear it. And the only way for you to really experience what I'm talking about is to go check out Mixing Made Easy Volume 2. It's really worth the investment to learn about this one concept. Now, as far as do I do it on every single one of my mixes? Well, no, certainly I don't do it on every single one of my mixes. I treat early reflections just like I do reverb. In what I mean by that is, if the track needs it, I'll add it and I'll deal with it. If it doesn't need it, I don't. A lot of times, some of the misconceptions when you watch training videos and watch training courses is some people watch me do something like early reflections and just assume that every single mix has to have it. And it doesn't always have to have it. It depends on what the mix needs. If I feel like a track, drums, or an entire mix, or whatever the case might be, seems a little closed in, doesn't have a lot of depth, doesn't have a lot of, it's really, really dry, and I want to give it that little extra something, and I want to give it a little bit more space. But again, we're not using reverb and washing things out. I'll use early reflections. So Jeff, the answer to your question is I don't use it on every mix. I do use it maybe 60% of the time. It really depends on the track. And again, it's a way to give some size to the mix without having it sound like it's being affected, and you don't even realize it's there unless it's pointed out to you. The listener in the end doesn't even realize what that is. They just know that the track sounds bigger and it sounds like it has more depth to it, and that's really what Early Reflections helps you achieve. So again, I urge you to stick with it. I know it sounds like you're a little frustrated by it, and most people are, as I was when I first started working with Early Reflections, and that technique was taught to me. But if you stick with it and you get more used to it, you'll find it's not as frustrating and not as bad as you think, and you'll use it when it's appropriate. You'll use it when you need to, and as the more you work with it, overuse it at first, and then back off when you feel like you've kind of got your head wrapped around it. So I hope that answers your questions. If you have any more questions about Early Reflections, you could certainly shoot me another email, but go back and watch the Early Reflections part of Mixing Made Easy Volume 2 a few times. I think once you wrap your head around it, you'll find it could be quite useful. So thanks for writing in, Jeff, and now let's go on to question number 2. Okay, question number 2 comes from Robert, and Robert writes in, "Hey Dave, watch your YouTube video on saving to an external hard drive. It made perfect sense, but I'm wondering if you can recommend saving all the sound sets, instrument libraries, and VSTs, as well as songs to an external drive, or just the song files. I have a 500 gig hard drive, external hard drive. What would be your recommendation? Thanks, Robert." Well, Robert, thanks for writing in. So yes, I do some YouTube video. I did a couple of YouTube videos on saving things to external hard drives to kind of optimize the performance of your computer. And again, it really depends on what computer and your processor speed and the amount of memory you have, so on and so forth. What I typically recommend and what I do is I personally just run my Studio One sessions or my DAW sessions off the external drive, and I keep all my song sets and my VSTs and everything on the internal hard drive with the actual DAW application. That seems to work for me. Now, depending on how many loops you have, how many libraries of software instruments you have, and those kinds of things, you may want to move them to an external drive as well. What this will do is it'll just help free up some hard drive space, obviously, on your hard drive, which is always at a premium with your internal hard drive, and it's cheap enough to move it to an external drive. So I would say at first, just try your song files first, and keep all the VSTs and all the loops and stuff on your internal hard drive. And if you find that your hard drive is getting really bogged down, or if your hard drive's running out of space, then you can move things over to an external one as well. Hard drives are pretty inexpensive today, so it won't cost you a whole heck of a lot to have even a couple of external drives. Maybe put one external drive for just your software libraries and just your loops and stuff, and then another external drive for all your Studio One or your DAW sessions. So try that, and if you have any other questions, feel free to email me and I'll try to help you along the way. So now let's head on over to question number 3. Okay, question number 3 comes from Tom, and Tom writes in, "Hi David, I purchased several of your Home Recording Made Easy series, and I'm on your mailing list. I really enjoyed your training classes, and I've already learned a lot from the easy style yet informative way you teach. Thank you." Well, thank you, Tom. I appreciate the kind words. I am a retired singer who now has a very small studio in my home. I'm using a Yeti Studio all-in-one interface with my 27-inch iMac. It is supported by PreSonus and iZotope. My question is, I like to just sit in this makeshift studio and sing to karaoke tracks. Do you have any training module or just for that type of configuration? If so, what's the name of the training? Also, if you do not, do you have any suggestions as to what, if I wanted to just adjust the karaoke track, and how can I? Thanks for your time, Tom. Okay, so it sounds like, again, I'm a little confused, but I think I might be able to help you. So basically you have an all-in-one interface, you have a 27-inch iMac, and you basically just want to sit in front of your computer and just sing to karaoke tracks. Basically what you would do, if I understand the correction right, the first answer is no, I don't have any training specifically to that, so I don't want to point you towards a Made Easy product because that's not going to help you here. But basically what you want to do is you just want to take your karaoke track, you want to import it into your DAW of choice, and then you want to play as a playback track, and then you want to plug your microphone into your interface and have another track in your DAW session, and you can arm it to record, and you can record yourself singing to the karaoke track, or you can just listen back and just have fun with it. Whatever, it's pretty simple and straightforward. There's not a lot of training. If you have a specific issue that you're dealing with inside of this setup, you can email me and I'll certainly try to help you. But basically, you're on the right track. You just basically put your karaoke track on one track and then your microphone on another track. Hit record enabled and hit the little monitor button so you can hear yourself. Make sure you're wearing headphones and don't talk into the microphone or sing into the microphone and have it come back through a set of studio monitors, because you're going to get a feedback loop. So make sure you're wearing headphones. But other than that, you're pretty much on the right track. But I do appreciate you purchasing the Made Easy products. I'm glad that it's helping you. And if you have any other questions, Tom, feel free to write in and I'd be sure to help you. So now let's head on over to question number 4. Okay, question number 4 comes from Ricardo, and Ricardo writes in, hope you're doing well. I have a question for you. I've heard from multiple folks that you should mix in mono, and I can understand the basics of why, as in, if you're able to distinguish each instrument and the levels are right in mono, they would sound amazing switching to stereo. However, I found that, for instance, in the case of sounds produced by something like Easy Keys, where the resulting audio can already have some processing, panning, reverb effects, etc., sounds extremely subdued in mono. And if I set the volumes in the mix right, when I switch it to stereo, those instrument sounds are much louder in the mix than they were in mono. In this case, would it be safe to mix in stereo? How would you tackle this issue? Thanks, Ricardo. Thanks, Ricardo, for writing in. Yes, mono, and I've talked about this as well. Mixing in mono, there's kind of maybe two sides of the argument. Some people will say don't mix in mono at all because most people listen to mixes in stereo these days and on headphones and such, and there's really no need to mix in mono. And others would say mixing in mono, excuse me, is exactly for the reason you mentioned, is that if you can get a mix to sound balanced with some clarity and you can hear all the instruments and distinguish between them, in mono, when you switch to stereo, it's going to be that much better. And I've done both for many, many years. And what I would say to you, the way I kind of do this today, is I don't mix solely in mono, but I check my mixes in mono. Just like I check my mixes on a set of headphones, a set of earbuds, different types of listening environments, I'll also check my mix in mono. And you're right, when you're dealing with a stereo VST, something like Easy Keys or in your example, when you fold things down to mono, it's going to sound subdued. It's going to sound it's not going to sound as pleasing. It's just not going to. But that's kind of the whole point, is to kind of check it and just make sure that nothing is sticking way out in the mix or way quiet in the mix, and you got to try to strike that balance. There's no possible way that you're going to have your mix, whether it be mono or stereo, sound absolutely perfect in every single kind of listening environment. It's impossible. You're really just trying to, get it so it'll play balance in as many listening environments as you can. And again, mono is something that you're not always going to, your music is probably not going to be played back in mono in too many instances, but there's still times where that may happen. So I would say just use it as a reference. At the end of the day, mix in stereo, and then just check your mixes in mono. And if I would rather have the Easy Keys in this particular example sit well balanced in a stereo mix, and then when you fold it to mono, maybe have it a little too quiet, or maybe it's not perfect, but you can kind of hear it, as opposed to setting that mix perfectly in mono, and then when you open up the stereo, it pokes way out of the mix. So again, use stereo as, I'd say, 80%, 90% of your mixing time, and then just check it in mono, just like you would check with headphones in different listening environments. You got to try to kind of get that happy medium. And that's kind of my take on mono these days. So I hope that helps you, Ricardo. If you have any other questions, be sure to write in. So now let's get on to the next question for this installment of Questions and Coffee with David. We're going to head on over to question number 5. Okay, the last question for this video comes from RJ, and RJ writes, "Hi David, thank you for all you do for the recording community." Well, thanks. I really do appreciate the kind words. It's my pleasure. I have my eye on the new Studio Live 16 Series 3, and I will get it as soon as it becomes available. I already own an interface, so I believe I will have no more use for it. I have a Studio 192 in DP88 made by PreSonus, and that is a total of 16 channels. I know that the Studio Live 16 Series 3 has better DSP than the Studio 192, and it also has 16 channels of a mixing and an interface. Would you recommend keeping both? I was thinking on selling the 192 and DP88 since I believe I will no longer have a use for it. I am thinking on recording and mixing through the Studio Live 16 Series 3 and use it for live gigs once in a while. What are your thoughts? Thank you again. Well, thanks RJ for writing in. Yeah, I had a similar situation, and I hear what you're saying here. So basically you already have 16 channels of input on your interface between the Studio 192 and the DP88, which are great pieces, by the way. I've used them both and they're excellent. Now, the Studio Live Series 3 is a brand new mixer coming out. Now, whether it has more or better, as you say, DSP than the 192, I don't know about better. Does it have more DSP? I'm not even really sure on the specs of that. It probably does. But let's set that aside for a second. Once you get the Series 3 Studio Live mixer, the 16 channel, you're right, you have kind of, duplicate setups. And if you're not planning to take your mixer out on the road that much, and it's basically going to be a studio piece where you're going to kind of leave it as your front end of your control room, I would say you could probably go with the Studio Live Series 3 and sell off the other units. That's kind of what I did in my studio. As soon as I got the Studio Live 32, I sold off my Universal Audio Apollo. Now, the Studio Live 32 has 32 inputs as opposed to 4 inputs, but I really didn't buy the mixer for recording as much as I did for mixing because I'm not taking it out on the road. So it depends on your workflow and how it's going to work for you. But I would say it would be a safe bet to sell off the 192, sell off the DP88, and just use the Studio Live. You're going to get the same quality as far as the preamp. I believe the preamp on the Studio Live Series 3 and the Studio 192 are the same. You're going to have more options in way of being able to use EQs and compressors and all other kinds of effects. I think you're going to have a lot more flexibility with the Studio Live Series 3 mixer than you will for the Studio 192 and the DP88. And once it becomes a full Studio One DAW controller, that's really where the magic, at least for me and probably for you as well, is going to happen with the Studio Live Series 3 mixer. So my opinion would be, yes, you would be safe to sell off the other two pieces and use that cash to help pay for the Studio Live Series 3 mixer. And I think you're going to be able to do everything that you can do with the 192 and the DP88 and a whole lot more. So that would kind of be my recommendation. I really do appreciate you writing in. So that's it for this week's Questions and Coffee video with David. If you want your question answered in an upcoming video, please be sure to email your question to info@homerecordingmadeeasy.com. That's info@homerecordingmadeeasy.com. Also, once again, please hit that subscribe button below. Follow me on Facebook. Follow me on Twitter. Email me if you have any more questions. And check out all the other videos on the YouTube channel. There is over 250 videos as of the recording of this video and lots of other Questions and Coffee with David videos in the archive under the Q&A playlist. And until the next Questions and Coffee video with David, this has been David Vignola with HomeRecordingMadeEasy.com. Thanks so much for your support, and I will talk to you all soon. Take care.